So we've had now direct developers, publishers, of everybody talking about ideation, about marketing, about kind of creation. And now we're going to finish strong on this Hypercasual Social Games track with a star-studded panel. Can only say star-studded, led by the wonderful Stephen Lee. This will be the final panel of the session. And this is going to be, basically talking about what hyper-casual games can teach the world. I guess it's going to be covering a lot of topics. Stephen, are you there? I can see you've got your background on.
I'm here. Nice to see you, Chris. It's been a while.
It's been a while. I've certainly been a while face to face. I'm good to see that you've kept very trim in lockdown. You've not. Where's the weight? It's embarrassing. You're letting the side down. You're thinner than you were last time I saw you.
Zoom is definitely helping out. I've definitely.
Well, I need a filter. I need a better filter. But no, and you're still in Berlin, Stephen?
Yes, I'm in Berlin. Yeah.
Cool. That's great. We've had people from. We went from the last panel to talk from Tokyo to New York, which was great. That was a cool thing we can do with Zoom these days. So I think your panel is joining progressively. We've got Jake again, hurrah, Callum, or Aysegul, I'm going to say that wrong, however I pronounce it. And I think that's everyone's in, rightly. So I'm going to leave you to take it from here, if that's okay. I'm here in the background if you need me.
Thanks, Chris.
And then we'll come back at the end to wrap up. But over to you, Stephen, and your panel.
Thanks very much. Great. Well, thanks everyone for tuning into this panel. Very excited to dive in with such an awesome group of experienced and successful people in the hyper-casual space. This is the hyper-casual track, and as an introduction, before we get into the panelists, I just wanted to share that, for myself, coming from the traditional game space and for over a decade, I was initially very skeptical about hyper-casual games. I think maybe the first one was probably Flappy Bird in 2014, and people were like, "What is this? This is not really a game, right?" And I think now I've been happily proven wrong by a lot of the folks here in this panel today. So I'm really excited to dive in and hear their experience and insights and understand what hyper-casual games can teach the world. So with that, let's get started with introductions. As for myself, at DECA Games, we're basically a live operations publisher. We help developers to take over operations of their existing live games. We also acquire games. We acquire studios as part of the Embracer Group. But enough about me. I would love for each of the panelists here today to also introduce themselves. Tell us, first of all, where you are, what you're doing for work with hyper-casual games specifically. And if you can, tell us, I guess, your favorite hyper-casual game, or maybe the one that you've been addicted to most recently. So we will start with ladies first, and then alphabetically by first name. So that means Aysegul, you go first.
Hey guys, thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here, and actually it's my first Pocket Gamer. I'm a little excited about that, and I'm a publishing director at BoomBit's hyper-casual external team. And actually what I do is day-to-day I'm working with studios and, on the ideation, from the ideation to launching a game. But I like to summarize my job as actually being able to publish good games. So my main focus is that. And right now I'm joining from Turkey. I'm living in Izmir, and yeah, actually that was all right. As a starter. Thank you for having me.
The hyper-casual game that you've been playing.
I can't be, I will say Shoe Race because it's our first success with Boom Hits. So, and also we are so proud about that because we were just 2 months. We were together for 2 months with the team, and we never met each other. It's like we worked online because of that COVID situation. So it was a great success for us. And also it's really female game. So I really like it. I will stick with Shoe Race. Thank you.
I'm up. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Callum. I am the head of growth for Snapchat. So working with developers at all levels, from small startups all the way through to AAA to launch, ideate, and succeed with gaming UA and growth. Based in London, been working in the industry for about 10 years, and my favourite game at the moment. Well, I work with so many, so I don't want to kind of cast aspersions against anyone, but the one I'm enjoying most at the moment is Rush Hour 3D from Good Job Games. Just super addictive and yeah, just great fun.
Hello, I'm Jake from Kwalee. I'm a senior publishing manager, so I'm kind of working with developers day in, day out, ideating, testing games, and working through the publishing process to bring games, hit games and great games to the world. I'm kind of in a fortunate position at the moment where Kwalee's latest release, Makeover Studio 3D, is number 2. And coincidentally, it is a game I've been playing a lot of recently. So that's my favorite hyper-casual game at the moment, but it changes pretty much daily.
Thanks, Jake. Hey guys, I'm Marco. I'm a senior publisher manager at JoyPac. Fundamentally, we're a hyper-casual publisher. We help hyper-casual developers to distribute their games around the world, most notably also in China. We have a very large footprint in China. And that's my core function and responsibilities for the team. My favorite hit at the moment is ABC Runner, a little plug for a game we've also published, but it is a fun game and I do like the slight educational twist to it. So it's one of those games which I'm happy for my son to play versus some of the other things that you can see on the App Store.
Awesome, thanks guys. I guess I should have known that most of you would plug your own games, but that's fine. That's totally cool. That's why we're here. So I think I'd love to dive right in with you guys. I think a lot of people tuning in today are obviously developers. There will be some that are already in the hyper-casual space, but as we were planning for this panel, I think we all agreed that there's a high likelihood of people that are maybe not completely in the hyper-casual space or thinking about getting into it. Maybe they're just here to learn more and think about whether or not it makes sense for their studio and their team. So I'd like to start with sort of more basic high-level approach for these relative newbies that maybe are not as experienced as some other people here. So what do you guys think that, you know, what do people not know about hyper-casual games, or maybe someone from the traditional gaming market, like PC, console, mobile games? What are the major differences? What are things that you guys think people need to know if they're thinking about hyper-casual games?
Yeah, my first thoughts are it is the most downloaded game in the world right now. I think that's one of the positives of hyper-casual. It's exploded since the craze of Flappy Bird. So on the positive side, it's a genre of game which is very popular around the world. But the cost of that is that it's hyper competitive, and I think developers should really be aware just how mindful they should be with the ideas that they have, because there's a lot of failures in the industry before you can have those kind of successes that you see on the App Store. And I think one should always be mindful of is that there are very few successes versus to get to that success takes a lot of time, and you don't necessarily see that from the outside. And you know, with what we do at JoyPac, you know, whenever we're presented with a game, you know, we're presented with a quality of game that we just fundamentally don't understand, and it's through a lot of ruthless execution and data insight and experimentation that leads us to potentially get a hit title. And that process is a long one. And I think developers should be mindful that the game that they necessarily start is not necessarily the game that they would necessarily finish with at the end of that process.
Agree. I think like it's a hugely data-driven market. So and a lot of games are, right. It's based on understanding how users are interacting with your game and understanding how you can optimize that journey to better monetize. I mean, obviously, if you're starting out completely fresh, hyper-casual games are ad monetized, typically a much shorter core loop, a much smaller core loop than a traditional game or a casual game or a mid-core game. And I think like one of the things that I love about hyper-casual games is firstly how accessible they are. Because they're mass market, because they're not really targeted at specific audiences, they're trying to capture as big an audience as possible. It means that the ideas, the themes, the concepts that you're coming up with for these games, you're trying to capture as many people as possible. You're trying to capture as much imagination as possible. And on top of that, like, it relies so heavily on game design and a mechanic that is enticing and interesting. It's really like a playground for game designers to try new things and see what works, see what's engaging, see what doesn't work. Like, it's always interesting and slightly heartbreaking to see a game that I'm really confident in and I love, and having that moment where we test it super confident and then suddenly, oh no, it hasn't worked out, and understanding kind of what could have led people away from that.
So actually, I mean, usually I worked with indies in my career. I'm in hyper-casual business for the last 2 years, and the first year was always with indies. I had bigger studios as well, but you know, in Turkey there are so many people that are interested in starting a business in hyper-casual. So I was talking with them, and actually I see there's 2 points of view. One, some of the developers and some teams, they think hyper-casual is super easy. And most of the time, these teams, they are mid-core or casual teams, and or some people, they want to start their gaming business, but they have no experience, and they think the Steam games, it's like, it's something really cool to develop, but hyper-casual is so easy, you know? And, but I think actually hyper-casual is like a minimalism, you know, it has a philosophy, and like their motto, less is more. Actually, it's not easy to, you know, it's not easy to develop. We need to find that format. It needs to be interesting, and it needs to be easy to play, but hard to master, and it needs progression, it needs everything. And also because of our audience is really broad, you know, from 13 to 65 years old and all genders, it needs to be interesting for so many people. Actually, it's easier to develop in terms of time, but it's not that easy to find a great hyper-casual game. So it has the same struggles. That's my opinion. Thank you.
I think just adding to what Aysegul was saying, I think from our perspective, when you look at the game creation itself is relatively simple, but it's such a competitive landscape out there that, again, it may not be an instant hit from the outset. So it's a trade-off between kind of the simplicity of getting a game to test in market, seeing what the user reaction is like, and then ideating upon that and creating a greater concept. But again, the competitive nature of the industry is such that there is so many people out there that are producing games of this nature that there is a significant trade-off there as well.
Super, thank you guys. I think you've raised some really interesting points. So there's a perception that development is really quick and easy, which it may be, but then maybe there's a lot more work under the hood to really make the game successful. And so I'd love to share more specifics with the audience. So from your guys' experience, what is the typical development life, development life cycle, or how long would it take you guys to typically develop a hyper-casual game from start to, let's say, launch?
Okay, I'm going. So actually, I'm day-to-day working with a studio in Izmir. And it depends on the game idea, actually. I mean, sometimes it's really easy. Maybe we can have the first prototype in a week, but for some games, it's like a month. And it's depending on the mechanic, actually. If it's harder to make, and also the art is important. If it's harder to make, maybe some games may take 2 months. But I'm talking about the first prototype. So even if it takes 1 week, usually it's like the first prototype and we put more stuff in it, and it takes 1 month to finalize the builds. What do you experience, guys? Is it same?
Yeah, it's kind of similar. I think it depends a lot on the size of the team and the scope of the project. So what that concept is, obviously, because hyper-casual, you've got such a broad net of ideas and concepts and types of gameplay. There are games that can take a few days to prototype the original, the first version of it and get that tested. And then there's some that can take a week or two just to get to that point where you've got enough to understand what the market reception for it is going to be. And then as Aysegul said, like going from there to building out all of these features obviously takes a bit more time, and it depends on the scope of the game, how it's kind of performed and what KPIs you're hitting, whether you need to improve something quite significantly or quite drastically, and whether that's kind of worth the time.
Yeah, I echo something really similar. We usually ask developers anywhere between 1 or 2 weeks for a prototype, and usually from there we make an assessment as to, you know, what is the voluptuous quality of this game? Is there market fit? Is it worth testing? Do we need to iterate further? And we need to answer all those questions before we decide, should we put some more work into this game? And what level of work do we need to put into it into a state that we would like for it to be in? So it's very case by case. It really hinges on the idea and the simplicity of the idea. If it's a very feature rich idea, then obviously that's going to take a little bit more time. And then I think Callum raised the great keyword of trade-off. You need to really understand, you know, is it worth that time to put in the work or move on to another prototype that you may have up your sleeve? So it's really case by case, but for a first port of call, 1 or 2 weeks to see initial concept.
There's also there's also ways that developers we work with that blow my mind every time, like coming up with an idea instead of kind of workshopping it and writing it down on paper and sketching stuff out, just playing around in Unity and making it happen there and then to understand, all right, what does it feel like, and quickly getting to the point where you understand the feel of that game. It's amazing to see. Sometimes I've been sat on calls with people screen sharing, just working through Unity. It's fantastic.
Yeah, that is a really nice part of the job, actually, seeing an idea from paper and actually having it on the phone in a very short space of time. It's amazing what some of these developers can do with Unity these days. It's a lot of fun.
Cool. And from the development to, let's say, the life cycle, from the experience of you guys have in publishing hyper-casual games, how long do you typically see a hyper-casual game sort of staying relevant in the market or continuing to earn money? Be useful to share some solid numbers with the audience if possible.
So it depends on the game and how it performs when you have that initial burst, but there are games we published a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, that are still performing well, still generating revenue for us. So there is quite a long tail there in terms of the success for the successful hyper-casual games. The ones that do essentially capture the imaginations of a huge audience, they're able to continue kind of doing that over a long period of time.
All right. Callum, you had something?
Yeah, I was just wanted to say, I think, kind of adding to what Jake was saying, it's there's no hard and fast rule as to kind of how long a game's life cycle is going to last for. If it's a hit, it gets to the top of the charts, and then you can kind of factor in virality, then of course you're going to see a game that lasts for longer. Some of the things that we're now seeing on Snap is that a lot of the legacy titles now are starting to come back to the market, just again to kind of give people variation as well. So working with a lot of our partners that we're seeing not only on kind of launch phases through to kind of now kind of relaunching, almost kind of a retro, the retro kit. So.
All right, I'm seeing a lot of questions coming in from our audience, which is always really exciting. So I'm going to keep the content moving. So I guess just to wrap up for developers that are you know, thinking about dipping their toes in the hyper-casual market, what advice would you guys give to a studio that's thinking about getting into hyper-casual? I think, Marco, you alluded to some of this earlier in your statement when you kind of, you know, said that it's not as easy as people think, but you know, do you guys have any experience or advice to give for, you know, people that are, let's say, coming from other gaming areas and trying to transition or to experiment with hyper-casual?
So it's definitely worth doing. I think Aysegul mentioned that like the games themselves are easy to pick up and hard to master. And I think that applies to the development process and the understanding of hyper-casual games themselves. Like it is pretty easy to get started in hyper-casual games. You can start playing around in Unity with any game idea. Like it's quite freeing to be able to play around with any game idea and see if you can make something that feels and looks great from it. And then as you work through that and start getting experience, you start to build up this understanding, this knowledge, and you start to master hyper-casual and start to understand, okay, these are the kind of things that fit into a lot of concepts, but every concept is totally different in order for it to work and stand out from the crowd.
I think for me, I think I'd always, you know, for anybody wanting to start on a hyper-casual, just to embrace the mindset of trial and error, and you know, don't be be afraid to kind of wrap up whatever idea you're working on and move to the next one quite quickly, and don't be afraid of that, and don't be afraid of data giving you the insight that you need to inform a better decision. I think it can be quite hard if you've got a really nice idea that you have quite close to your chest that you really want to get out, but for whatever reason it isn't a market fit. You've got to make that tough call to say, well, you know, maybe we should park that and move on to something else. Because as we alluded to earlier, there's a huge checklist of requirements for a hyper-casual hit. It's the toughest genre in the industry, and everything needs to be on point to get to that to get to that moment of scale. So just embrace that and enjoy the process, because it's a very quick to entry market in the sense that you can build prototypes very quickly. You can partner up with publishers that will give you some runway to test your ideas. But then the following steps, you know, is the hard work.
I think the most important thing about this, you know, they need to research, because we have to admit you can't win the war at the table. You know, you need a strategy. And usually what I encounter with new starters, newbies, they have a couple of ideas, but they are not checking if, you know, 3 years ago a game became a hit with that idea. And also, I mean, they need to research, they need to do their homework, and then they don't, sometimes they are attaching with their ideas too much. I mean, they love their idea and they believe it's gonna be a successful game. In terms of casual and mid-core, maybe it can be, you know, it's totally different markets. But in hyper-casual, if it's not trendy, it has not so big chance. And also, I mean, what I want to say, please don't feel so strong about your ideas, because we are, I mean, all people here, I believe we are producing so many ideas and we kill them. We are not getting connected with them, and we have to do this. I never see someone experience saying, oh, my idea is perfect, how do you kill it? You know, it's really normal. You need to kill 100 ideas for getting one hit. So please accept this, and also please keep it simple. Usually people are gamers, they want to be in that industry, and they think if it's complicated, it's a good game. No, in hyper-casual, if it's simple, then it's a good game.
I think one really strong bit of advice is, like, there's so much content out there from events like this and talks where multiple publishers are giving advice on hyper-casual games. In addition to that, there's loads of history of hyper-casual now, because it's moved so fast over the past few years, that there are plenty of games out there that you can play to start building a solid understanding of what a hyper-casual game is, as you're starting to tool around in Unity and play with different mechanics and play with any ideas that you've got. So yeah, it's worth learning and working on it at the same time.
Awesome feedback, guys. Thank you. So, you know, a few of you have mentioned, you know, do your research, do your homework, and look at the market, look at the trends. This brings me to a question that I had that was also echoed by one of the people tuning in. What happens when you have a game that's essentially copying or cloning another game? How big of a challenge is this, and how are you guys tackling this in your respective roles?
I mean, I'm starting, guys. It's for me, it's a no. You know, copying is. I mean, we always use that methodology. It's scamper. It's like combining, merging games. Actually, you know, successful game mechanic merging with a different trend. That's something we use, and our developers are using it. Actually, it's a game design methodology, so it's okay. But if you are copying something else, I don't want to work in that project, you know, because it's not unique, it's not your idea, and usually copycats never work. I mean, so it's not profitable as well.
Yeah, like publishers have got people dedicated to dealing with clones of games. Like we've got people dedicated to dealing with clones of our games, like handling all of that stuff for our developers. I think like if you're going to create a clone or a copy of a game, do it to learn about hypercasual and learn about the feel of that game and how to create that feel, but don't expect it to be a huge success. If you're copying a game that's already been massively successful, it's already been massively successful. It's not really going to work. It's not worth investing a huge amount of time in. But if you're completely new to the space, there's something to be said for using that to kind of build your understanding and build your knowledge without necessarily making it something that you attempt to be a hit. It's something that you can use to build your understanding and then move to the next project where it's an original idea, it's your idea and you're creating something new.
Right. I think one of the attendees asked a related question, which I'd love to throw to Callum. So the question was, do you think there should be tougher rules around game cloning? So from a platform perspective or not as a, you know, from your unique perspective in this panel, what do you think about that one, Callum?
Super interesting question. And I think from our perspective, we have to remain wholly agnostic. I think there's no, from our perspective, we work very, very closely with our partners. And again, if there's an open question around anything that is certainly questionable or underhand, again, it's something that we would have to take on a case-by-case basis. I have to say, in all sincerity, it's a very, very rare thing that I've encountered. Again, less than one hand, I could probably count the number of occasions that I've kind of been involved in a question like this or a query of this nature. But again, we would deal with it on a case-by-case basis and kind of sync with all those involved.
Cool. Sounds good.
I just want to add that you know, a copy is always going to be a derivative of the original. So you're always just going to you're just making it a little bit harder for yourself right from the outset. And I think there's a big difference between a copy and having influence by something. So if you look at, like, I don't know, if you want to take an analogy of the hip hop genre, hip hop is a mishmash of lots of different ideas that have been made previously, but kind of wrapped in a different way and formed in new art. And I think that approach is okay. And to echo Callum's point, we are agnostic to all ideas, but I think direct clones is just not something interesting because it's already been done. It's already out in the market, and you're already putting the economics more out of your favor. So yeah. I'd always try and get something unique from the beginning.
Been done, and it's not going to scale.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement on that one. Thanks, guys. So Marco, you brought up an interesting idea about metrics earlier, and this is a question which a lot of people tuning in right now are really curious about. So from your positions in the hypercasual space, what are some key benchmarks that you can share in terms of what you're looking for, or what are the key KPIs? So for example, you guys soft launch a game. What are you looking for in terms of retention, monetization, for example, CPIs, whatever? Would love to hear some actual numbers and rather than dancing around if possible. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, there's two main buckets of that. One is the kind of the marketing metrics that we look at on the creative side. So from there, we're looking for a low CPI, but also we pay close attention to the install rate of those creative campaigns. So CPIs, we're looking at anything less than 50 cents is good, or something to work on or to improve. And then on the gameplay side, I think D1 is very important, and anything upwards of 40% we take with some interest, and that's pretty much it, to be completely frank.
You guys look at obviously D1 is super important. Do you guys even look at, like, let's say D30 or something like that, or is it mostly about the D1?
We do look at D7 as well, but from prototype phase, I think we skew a little bit more attention to D1 to D7, and then we kind of pay a little bit more attention to D7 once we've iterated on the idea a few more rounds. Right. But not D30. It's something that we don't look at because of the nature of the game. It's a very snack type game, and usually most of your gameplay sessions are happening within a 10-day window anyway.
Stephen, I think just to add to that, I think every game is so vast. I'm going to kind of muddy the waters a little bit because every game is so vastly different. Every gameplay is slightly different. The target audience is going to be slightly different. But everything is governed off the back of the creatives that are produced, and driving click-throughs and driving installs is absolutely critical to kind of boost to lowering the CPIs ultimately. So if we can see a strong day one retention, that's great. But again, it's the creative iteration that is so absolutely important in order to try and drive user interest and user engagement from the outset. And the lower you can get that, obviously the better ultimately the better the initial cost and versus performance. So I think from our perspective, we will do a lot of work at Snap and with other supply partners as well, that they will have a platform where they can do soft launches, they can do creative A/B testing in order to be able to ensure that we've got the best style of creative ready to go when launch happens. Because the first week when you're trying to drive a game up the charts and for as little cost as possible, it's all going to be governed by creative and as a result of that, performance therein as well.
Thank you for that. Just want to throw in a note for the panelists that we're getting a lot of questions. Some of them we may not be able to get to. So if you feel like answering some of them through the Q&A, please feel free to do that as we go. But otherwise, I'll try to get to them as soon as possible. So you guys mentioned, having to go for a strong, D1 retention. I think you said 40%, Marco. So from a developer standpoint, what happens if you launch a game with one of you guys and the D1 is not there? What are their options? Do you guys just say sorry, thanks, but no thanks, or are you going to be working with them to try to get that up? I'd just love to map out the typical outcomes for people tuning in.
I think again, it's quite a case-by-case thing. So it depends on the stage the game is at. So how much gameplay is there? Like, is there enough content for people to come back the next day? And in addition to that, it depends on, like, can you see a path to take this game down that could bridge that gap? So say you've got like a 20% day one retention. Is there something you can do that can increase that, like double that retention? And there are some games where, okay, we're still quite early on in the development process. There's a significant change we can make that's worth a shot. And there are some games where you've tried a few different things and kind of inched up that day one, and it hasn't quite reached the point where you know that it needs to be in order for it to succeed. So there's always a point where you've got to kind of make that data-driven decision to go, okay, it's not worth spending more time on this when we're just kind of trying and almost like banging your head against the wall trying to make that difference, when you could spend that time working on something new that gets there much faster.
Right. Okay. So what do you guys see as the biggest challenges or threats for hypercasual? I mean, has the hypercasual industry peaked? What's going on? What do you guys, I mean, obviously there's a few things we can dive into, but I'd love to get your very quick thoughts about what you think is the biggest challenge facing your industry at the moment.
I'm more than happy to start this answer. I think with the Apple announcement yesterday, the imminent kind of enforcement of ATT, that we're going to see a level setting of the marketplace again. It's a huge unknown. The fact that now we're having to drive user consent is a huge step for the industry. And so from that perspective, yeah, we feel that this is going to be the next big challenge. And speaking at it from a user acquisition standpoint and a growth standpoint, Snap, we feel, is incredibly well prepared in order to support anybody that's looking to try and navigate this very uncertain time. From our perspective, we feel it's a natural kind of progression of the industry. Snap is fully privacy by design, and it's a natural segue into the kind of the ecosystem's maturity. So if there's anything that we can do to kind of assist when it comes to growth strategy, please let us know.
I think on IDFA, like all of hypercasual is kind of in the best position of the industry, I feel, for IDFA to come in, well, the iOS 14.5 update to come in, because we're not using, in order to determine the success of a game, you're not using a huge amount of targeting in the first instance. You're trying to get as many people as possible. So of all the industries, of all the types of games that you could be working on, hypercasual is one that I feel is in the best position to handle it. Obviously there's going to be an impact, but I think hypercasual will be able to handle that impact quite well.
Cool. Thanks a lot, guys. And I think, yeah, I think let's just get to the big elephant in the room, which is IDFA. I mean, if you guys, you know, have a specific thing that your companies are doing to basically cope with this, or advice that you can share with developers, I think now is the time to very quickly touch on this. I don't want to spend too much time on it because there's way too many questions coming in, but please feel free to fire away if you have a specific thought on IDFA.
I think everyone's making their games compliant with the new regulations, right? That's the first thing to say. Outside of that, I think like there's a period of continuing what we're doing and understanding the impact that it has, and understanding the how much of an impact there is, because it's still quite an unknown, right? Until it happens, we then start to see what difference it makes. And I think, as I said, like Hypercasual is set up to, in the first instance at least, not make a huge amount of use of that targeting, to start understanding like how much scale can we get, what kind of mass audience can we get for this. So I feel like we're in a good position, and Hypercasual will, obviously the whole industry is going to kind of change and grow and adapt to it.
I think it's just too early to call, and it's another wait and see movement, and the seismic change that every app developer is going to experience. I think I've got more chance telling you guys the success of the Super League versus iOS 14. But to add to Jake's point, I think we're in a good position, because, you know, hyper-casual games, for them to be successful, they need to be mass market. So you know, you need to, you know, irrespective of the targeting qualities, the KPIs need to be right for a wide demographic. So we don't anticipate too much friction from the update, in all honesty.
I think from a growth perspective, the supportive SKAD network, making sure that you've got your conversion values mapped with the MMP is absolutely critical in order to be able to kind of navigate a post IDFA world. Hypercasual is in a good place because, again, the targeting, generally speaking, is very, very broad. But you obviously, it's super important that anybody that you're working with, we're able to kind of understand where those installs have come from. So in that regard, make sure, yeah, in getting set up, work closely with your MP, work closely with your supply sources, make sure that you've mapped your events correctly, and the conversion mapping is set up. That's our biggest ask.
So from challenges to facing the hypercasual, let's move on to some opportunities. In planning for this panel, we had a nice conversation last week, and I asked you guys, you know, is it possible for a developer to, you know, succeed without a hypercasual publisher? Can they succeed on their own? Aysegul, you mentioned a specific example in Turkey, which I think brings up an audience question as well. So, you know, Turkey and Istanbul seems to be a really hot gaming hub right now in hypercasual. So is there any reason for this? What's the secret sauce? If you can share a little bit about that, that would be super interesting. Thank you.
Of course, I think it's because of the demographics of Turkey. I mean, we have a young nation, and most of the guys, I mean, people, they are studying computer engineering. Actually, we are not so great at art sites, to be honest. Usually Turkish studios, I mean, what we have as a source, most of the time development capacity. So these guys, they want to start their own businesses, and because of the Turkish economics, actually it's a right place to, you know, start your business life. And also, I think we are gamers. I mean, since childhood, I was a gamer. All my friends are gamers, so we love gaming. It's also another reason. And what about publishing games by themselves? I mean, I like to work with professionals. And, you know, right now I'm a publishing director. I'm in this business for 2 years. I'm testing so many games. I have some successful titles, but still I need my team. You know, I don't feel like I can be a publisher at all. So, I mean, it's a really big teamwork. So there's a creative side of it. There's a publishing, live ops, and market research, game design. You know, it's a really, really big team. And I think working with professionals for all these levels, it's really important. There's an example in Turkey, yes, Ruby Games. Actually, they published their first title with a publisher, and then they learned from them, and then they started to do publishing, and they are successful. It's an also example, but I think they need to learn first, and this is possible with working with a publisher closely and publishing a successful game first to, you know, learn the procedure.
Thanks, Aysegul. So within the few minutes we have left, I'd love to move sort of more towards looking forward, towards the future. And let's talk a little bit about what's coming for the industry, what you guys see coming in terms of trends. There's a lot of questions in the Q&A panel about opportunities for innovation in hypercasual, if there's something you guys see, or if there's any examples of hypercasual mechanics being used in other verticals like education, health, well-being, etc. So let's brainstorm a little bit or share your guys' thoughts on future trends. Where do you see hypercasual headed in terms of the trends, the type of game, and also maybe branching out into new areas?
Who wants to start?
I think it's
Okay.
if I knew the trend of gaming, I'd be a very rich man right now. I think one thing that's obvious is that the quality is getting better. I think it's becoming a little bit more easier to build a quality prototype than it used to be maybe 4 or 5 years ago. There's lots of great assets in the Unity Asset Store, for instance. The Unity game engine's getting a lot more sophisticated. You can do a lot more complex things now in much shorter spaces of time. So I think that's one obvious thing we'll see in the coming years, is that just that little bit extra of kind of polish that we'll see from prototypes is just getting that little bit better over time. And maybe can change the genre, because the look and feel of the game is very important, and in some cases you can get a hyper casual game that may look like a mid-core or a casual game. So it might change the genre, maybe.
I think there's also a really good kind of mindset. So I used to work in it was kind of across media and entertainment, education, and different client-based apps, games, and websites. A lot of stuff was educational for kids, and there's stuff that I learned in that job that was focused on making educational games and making sure that it's easy to understand the content and get that point across really quickly and succinctly in a fun way that keeps people engaged. And I think a lot of that stuff is kind of transferred across into what I'm doing in hypercasual now, in terms of making sure that the core of your game, like the gameplay, is understandable. It's easy to understand. There's this mindset of making things as easy to understand for as many people as possible. And I think that kind of approach can lend itself well to things like education, things like health, to help build products that are easy for people to pick up and easy for people to learn from, but build from hyper-casual games and all of the expertise of hyper-casual developers.
I mean, for me, my observation is plus Jake and Marcos said, it started to become more complicated. I mean, people started to like multi-mech games, multi-mechanic games, different trends. For example, Shoe Race, it's a runner game with option choosing. I mean, it's like combining two different mechanic actually. So I realized that people nowadays like these kind of different approach to games. So I feel like they learned playing games, because hypercasual is bringing new audience to gaming every year. So right now they want more complicated but still simple ideas.
Excellent. So believe it or not, we're actually running into our final few minutes. So I'd love to give each of the panelists here today a chance to share a final thoughts about hypercasual games, whether it be something that you feel like you've learned, which is really valuable for the audience, or maybe tackling one of the outstanding Q&A questions, or a final point that you want to drive home in terms of how people should be thinking about it, I'll give each of you a chance. So feel free to start whenever you can.
I'll happily start. From my perspective, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for everybody's time today. It's been hugely insightful and an opportunity to share. I think from my perspective, the market is about to reset, and there's a huge opportunity to kind of level set going into a new post-IDFA world. When we look at it from a growth standpoint, it's such an exciting world out there that when you ask about the genres of hyper-casual, the types of games, that's the beauty of this industry, right? That there is no one set genre, or there's no one set style of gameplay which is going to win out. Anybody can produce a hit title. That's the beauty of this whole concept. I think from our perspective, what Snap's trying to do is trying to ensure that in order to be able to navigate the post-IDFA world, that we are able to kind of handhold and set up people for success. There is a lot of unknowns out there. There's a lot that Apple hasn't said to us, which everybody's having to discover for themselves. You can take steps in order to try and best position yourselves to minimize the disruption that's coming. And if there's opportunities that we can help with that communication and with that kind of setup guides and readiness guides, then please do reach out. But again, next week is not just going to be a hard stop, right? It's going to be a reset, and it's going to be an exciting time.
If I can, I want to answer this question about hyper-casual finding itself with negative connotations in the industry. So someone's asked, hyper-casual can sometimes find itself with negative connotations in the industry. How do you think the conversation can change on this? So I think a lot of people used to see hyper-casual games in the same way, like they're ad monetized. They're just games full of ads. There's not much to them. I think one thing that got me really excited about hyper-casual games is the fact that there's such kind of precise design to them, and such great feeling to every hyper-casual game that scales the charts and succeeds. And you can see that from a very short video of that game. I think the way that conversation changes is people make fewer clones and stop trying to make clones work, because most of the time they don't, and focus on the things that make hyper-casual games great. Like they're games that allow anybody to play, allow anybody to understand what a game is, and start introducing new people into the industry, get people excited about making games, get people excited about playing games. I think there's something really great about growing and building the number of gamers in the world, and people that don't identify as gamers and call themselves gamers, they're playing hyper-casual games. They don't think they're a gamer, but they're playing hyper-casual games. They've all got time to play these games. It's a fun little world to kind of let go of everything else, forget about everything else, wait for the bus, sit on the toilet, make a drink. Like there's time to play all these games, and I think it's a great thing to see hyper-casual games bringing people into that ecosystem.
As a final remark, I just want to remind developers, just don't be afraid to reach out to a publisher like ourselves or anyone. If you have a good game idea, I mean, publishers are there to help you to get your game idea out there. The vested interest is very much mutual. I think it was just alluding to your earlier question, Stephen, about, can you do this on your own? Sure, you can do it on your own, but the odds are a little bit more against you. You need a little bit more luck and a little bit more runway to support you. What a publisher can bring is essentially, a financial contribution, and also a savings in time as well, which is fundamentally important for you to get some results on your game quite quickly. So just as a shout out, a plug into, I guess everyone here on the panel, we're here to help.
And I want to thank you for having me. And also, like Michael said, you can reach out us on LinkedIn. We are using it really actively. I think all people are using it. So thank you very much.
Guys, I'd like to echo that. I've been involved in a lot of panels over the years, and I've never actually seen so many questions come in during a panel. So I want to thank the audience that's tuning in right now. And I want to say that, yes, definitely, please reach out with your questions. I'm sorry we could not get to all of them, but reach out to Aysegul, Jake, Callum, Marco. Do not reach out to me about hyper-casual, because I'm not an expert here. But you know, you can find us through the Meet to Match, through the Discord, obviously. Chris, I don't know if we have a few minutes. If so, maybe we can try to tackle one or two more. But if not,
yeah, I mean, you're the end of the track, mate. So if you want to tackle one more, you can do that. I don't. It's up to you.
Okay. Do you guys see a question on the open questions that you want to tackle in the next 1 or 2 minutes, just to help out the people tuning in?
Actually, there is one. How are you dealing with Facebook UA becoming inefficient in the last few months? So we have Snap. Actually, we have other networks, and also Facebook is still working efficiently for games. But I think every game has different crowds, so we need to analyze the audience of game and use the right platform for it. Actually, what we should do is that's, in my opinion. Maybe Callum, you want to add something to it?
From my perspective, it's about diversification, right? So Facebook isn't, and Google aren't just the duopoly. There are a lot of other really excellent supply sources out there. Snap being very much one of them. I think when you look at the marketplace as such, there is a lot of opportunity out there to get very much differentiated demand across multiple sources. And it's called a media mix for a reason, right? It's a mix of different sources, and I think this is all important. Snap is one that's coming to the fore, and especially across a multitude of genres within gaming, from hyper-casual to hardcore. We've got an audience and an audience size that we can cover all.
Awesome. Let's see if we can knock out the 1 or 2 more. So I think 2 of the questions revolve around sort of the evolution of hyper-casual games. Some of them are going more mid-core with more, you know, deeper features and mechanics, and some are going more casual. So where do you guys see the market headed? Is there such a thing as too casual? Is there such a thing as casual core? I don't really see why it's like, you know, they need to be labeled, but I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this one.
I do kind of feel like there are too many labels for different types of games. Hyper-casual games, like the way I see it, they're focused around this core mechanic. They're focused around something that's really satisfying, with kind of minimal metagame around that. Games like Archero, I feel like they're casual games that have been marketed quite effectively in a similar way to hyper-casual games. So taking on board some of the core themes and commonalities that you see in hyper-casual game ads that really showcase the core mechanic and showcase how easy it is to play that game, and how easy it is to understand that gameplay. I feel like there's going to be some hyper-casual games that lend themselves better because of the theme, because of the idea, lend themselves better to a longer gameplay loop, and some that lend themselves to very quick and short bursts. Both I'd still see as a hyper-casual game, and I worry that going through kind of like terming everything as, okay, this is a casual core game, this is a hardcore game, this is a mid-core game, it starts to muddy the waters a bit, right?
Great.
I just wanted to add something a little bit anecdotally, if you don't mind. I think one of the things that we've done at Snap is, in order to try and boost engagement, boost retention, is we've got a developer toolkit called SnapKit, which is on snapkit.com. Sorry, awful plug. But we've got kits now which include Bitmoji Kit, where you can now start to render your Bitmoji character, which is synonymous with snaps and snap emoji. You can actually start to render this in the game, and again, it just boosts the engagement and the stickiness between Snap and the developer's app. So go take a look. It's something now we've started to roll out, and there's been a really great adoption of it.
Well, thank you guys so much. I think we're pretty much up on time. So
yeah, so I know you could go on, and you guys are. It's very interesting. That's why later on, and you, thank you so much for being so generous with your insights and sharing some numbers and some data and talking on all sorts of topics. So I think we will wrap it there and let you go off and have lunch, and people can grab you in the Meet to Match or the Discords. But thanks so much, Stephen, for hosting that, and thank you to Jake and Aysegul. Fantastic. You are by no means an imposter, so congratulations on your first thing. And to Callum and to Marco, thanks guys. That's everybody, I think. So great. You go for the Digital Ether. Thank you for your time this morning. And I'm going to just wrap up this track now. So
Yes.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, everyone. My pleasure.